you for your warm welcome. It's been a long time since I've been at this church. I was trying to think when the last time it was, and I think it was when I was in college, I think. But it's also nice to be able to speak for a church service. I'm a hospice chaplain, and so I spend most of my time with doing a lot of funerals. In fact, since moving to Washington, and I've only been in Washington now for, I think, almost 15 months, and I have done more funerals in the time being here than I did in my 14 years living in Florida. So working as a hospital chaplain, I would get asked to do funerals from time to time, but in hospice, I tend to get to know my patients a little bit for longer periods of time and have a lot of patients that are not connected to local churches. And so I end up doing a fair amount of funerals. So it's nice to be at a church, to worship on Sabbath, and to also be in my own faith group, because sometimes it can get challenging with, because as Adventists we have such a unique view on death and the hope. And so many don't have that hope, and so many tell me, well, you can have a couple Bible verses, but just a couple. And so it's nice to be in a place where we expect to be able to open God's Word. And so as the children's story I was talking about, it was about questions. And so, questions are a lot of how we learn. So if we could have the first slide. So on average, do you see that there? The children ask 300 questions per day. So you that are parents, does that seem to ring true? Does that sound about right? Well, as you see, there was also a group of 4-year-old girls that were studied, and they were even more inquisitive. Look at that, a whopping of an average of 380 questions per day. That's a lot of questions, isn't it? But there's also a lot of learning going on, too. So what type of questions are there? We can go to the next slide. I was kind of going through my head of English classes, thinking now, couldn't remember all of them, so it was good to kind of look at, and closed questions are pretty common. What kind of those is? Just kind of yes and no, or some people call them kind of no-brainer ones, where you either know it or you don't know it. And open questions, now those are questions that really get the mind thinking more and are kind of open for further interpretation. And in my job as a chaplain, that's a lot of the type of questions I want to ask, is leading questions. Because with those leading questions, it is amazing when you open that door and provide a listening space, what will flow forth from that. So in our society, what we tend to do, we use Google and Siri, and we read, and we're isolated. But Siri doesn't really talk back to us, except maybe to say, what was that? I didn't understand you. Or one time Siri told me, that's beyond my realm. And so, but it's nice to have someone that can actually converse back and forth and not just have that just quick little question. And then there's also leading questions. And so, a leading question would be like, well, tell me more about your pain, or how did that make you feel? So you're kind of setting the stage and asking a specific vein, not just a wide open. And then there's also rhetorical questions. And I know we've all heard those. Sometimes in your head you're answering them, but you know that the speaker or the author is not really expecting an answer. Well, the Bible is filled with a ton of questions. And the more I started thinking about that, from the very beginning to the end, there's questions throughout there. Some are easier to answer than others, and some are spelled out for us, and others we may not get the full answer until we get to heaven. But what I wanted to look at is some of the questions that Jesus asked, because he is the most masterful questioner, and also I think listener, and can teach us so much of how to communicate with others. So if you can see there, I had to narrow it down, because when I Googled this, it was kind of helpful to do that, because it saved me a little time. And plus, this past week I was sick. I wasn't even sure if I was going to make it here to speak, because I think getting around all of the sick people I've been around, I caught something, so wasn't quite sure. But when I Googled this, one of the articles that came up, it said that Jesus asked at least, I think it was over 100 questions that they had just in the New Testament. But if you look throughout the whole Bible, even more. So I decided I would pick 7, since, you know, it's the perfect number and we're here on the 7th day. So I couldn't resist picking 7. And we don't have time to go through each one, but I just wanted to briefly look at some of those, and then we're going to focus on one. And as you're reading those, I'm sure you can come to mind the different instances that Jesus spoke these words. So, which is it easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or say, get up and walk? Do we know the story that that's with? It's with the paralytic. Remember hearing Jesus say that? Or how about this one? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? Boy, I needed that reminder. How often can we worry and think, well, you know, if I just think about this a little bit more, or if I just kind of mull over this, maybe I can figure it out. But God doesn't want us to spend all that time worrying, because he says, I've got it handled. Trust in me. How about number 3? Why are you afraid? What story do you think that is? Anybody think of which?
The storm?
The storm, yes. Because Jesus was on that boat. Could you imagine a day like today, kind of stormy out there? I don't think I could sleep so well, but Jesus was asleep on there, and the disciples, they were pretty distressed. He woke up and he commanded the storms to stop, and also told his disciples, why are you afraid? I need that reminder too. How about who touched my clothes? Could you imagine that scene of Jesus in this great big crowd? And have you ever been just even in the mall or walking somewhere and you have people brush up against you? It'd be kind of a silly question to say, who touched me? But Jesus had a point in that question. He knew more than us. He's the most masterful questioner, because he could see the full picture. We can only see a little bit. So sometimes we have to be careful with our questions to not be too intrusive or too personal. But Jesus got to see further and had a precise reason for the questions that he asked. How about number 5? This one, Jesus is quoting from Psalms. And that's a hard one. There he was in agony saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And there are times when in our lives we can feel like that too. I'm often with patients that are just wondering, why did this happen? You know, I've lived a good life, I've gone to church, but things happen. How about number 6? Why are you angry with me for healing the whole man on the Sabbath? Jesus was judged a lot, wasn't he? He was often kind of put in a corner by the Pharisees and others, as they wanted to judge every little thing he did instead of looking at the bigger picture that he was trying to show them. And how about number 7? Do you love me? And this is when he was talking with Simon Peter. And how many times did he have to ask Simon Peter that question? 3 times. It took him a long while. Sometimes it takes us a while too to realize, do I love God enough? Does he love me enough? There are so many questions. We could spend this whole day going through question after question, and probably each one of these questions we could talk about for a long time as well. But where I'd like to go next is to slide number 4 and look at the story of Nicodemus. So this isn't a direct question that Jesus is answering, but well, I said that wrong. It's looking at the question that Nicodemus asked. But I want to focus on it because it's the way that Jesus listens and responds and is there. So we know that Nicodemus was a Pharisee, and a lot of the Pharisees were out to get Jesus, weren't they? They were planning different ways and were pretty sure that he was just too radical for their times and was breaking all the rules. Well, Nicodemus had this burning question on his heart, but he didn't want to be seen by the rest of the people where he lived, so he devised a plan to come late at night to talk to Jesus. Was Jesus surprised by that? No, he knew and he was prepared. But how about those of us, when we get home from work, do we really want to be bothered? After you have a long day, are you ever just kind of ready to just silence your phone and just, I've had enough? But Jesus was ready and willing, even though he worked hard and had long hours, more than we can even imagine. So let's read this. So if you'd like to join me on the even verses. So I'll read the odd ones, and if you will join me with the even verses. So now there was a man of the Pharisee named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you have come from God as a teacher, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered and said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God.
Nicodemus said to him, How can a man be born when he is old? He cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born, can he?
Jesus answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. Wouldn't you like to have been there? We only have just a little snippet of the conversation. I can imagine Jesus talking to him a little bit more in depth. Can't you? Making eye contact with him, meeting him at his level, and not just hurrying on. Because I bet Nicodemus was kind of expecting a very scholarly answer in a very subdued tone. Not the personal way that I imagine Jesus did to him. We don't know really the rest of the story, do we? There isn't many mentions of Nicodemus, except later in the Bible, in the book of John 19:39, it speaks about Nicodemus being, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes to help anoint Jesus' body. But that's about it that we know. Well, when we get to heaven, won't that be neat to ask Nicodemus, so what happened? What's the rest of the story? Were you changed? How were you treated by your fellow Pharisees and Sadducees, all those different people? There's a lot we can glean from the story of Nicodemus. But Nicodemus, I think what I like most about him is, even though he probably took a little underhanded way of going late at night, he still went. He didn't let his fear of judgment or of oh, maybe this guy is just a quack. But he had this desire, and he couldn't let that go. And I have to believe that that's the Holy Spirit that was leading him, and he was willing to listen and to go, despite it not being popular. So questions help us learn, and they help us to get to know each other better. So as I mentioned before, I've been a chaplain now for almost 15 years, and the bulk of my ministry was in the Florida hospital system, working for the Adventist health systems. And I worked in Orlando area. There were 8 hospitals. And the hospital that I began at was over 1,000-bed hospital. So here I am, a small town girl coming from Sequim, went to college in Walla Walla, hadn't been in these big cities. In fact, one of the first things I was told is, in Sequim, and I'm sure here in Port Townsend, we were taught that when the light turns yellow, what do? You slow down, and you prepare to stop. Well, so I was doing that in Florida, and all of a sudden I was having all these people honk their horns at me, giving me horrible signs, and I was like, my goodness, and yelling at me, what am I doing wrong? So thankfully, one of my wiser friends was riding with me, and he'd gone to school in Texas, so he's used to bigger places. So he said, well, you're going to get rear-ended or killed if you keep slowing down. So he goes, just put this in your head. When it's yellow, excello. So unfortunately, I kind of became that city girl where I learned you had to just kind of speed up once you saw it yellow, because in Florida, at least 2 or 3 people would go through that. And usually, I would think I was really, really just cutting it close. I'm thinking, oh goodness, this is not good. My heart's racing. I go through it. I look behind me. About 3 or 4 people go behind me. I really was not that brave, but you know, we're taught these things, and that gives us safety to abide by some of those things, but sometimes we have to adapt just for safety. But in Florida Hospital, here I was in this huge hospital, and I was excited to be able to start my ministry being a chaplain, and it was doing what I loved. But what I didn't know is that a big part of what I was supposed to do is to take around this form called an advance directive or a living will. Talk about heavy legalese jargon. So here I am, and I was 26 when I started, but I looked even younger. And so I'd walk into the door, and people wouldn't really believe me that I was a chaplain. Or they would hear the word chaplain, and, am I dying? What did the doctor tell you that I don't know? And then to make it worse, here I had this clipboard with these yellow sheets. I'll never forget it. It was back before we had computers in the hospital for charting, so it was all paper. So I would have this big sheet with all the names of the people I had to go look at and talk with about advance directives, and I would have it was kind of daunting, and they would look at me. You know, they didn't know me. I looked young. I didn't look experienced. And I was going to ask them hard questions about, so if your health condition gets worse than it is right now and you can't speak for yourself, who would you like to speak for you? Well, you mean I have to think about this right now? Am I dying? Are you telling me that I'm not going to get out of the hospital? So it didn't go well at first. You know, every door I go into, I kind of dread it because I'm like, oh, here goes these intrusive questions. And then even worse part of the question is saying, well, let's say you're in a persistent vegetative state. So would you like to have hydration withheld, or would you like to have hydration? Or would you like to have be on life support or not be on life support? So looking at me like, can you explain that in simpler terms? Or can you come back another time? Because in the hospital, do we end up sleeping very well? Usually not very much sleep. You get nervous because it's a different place than you're used to be. And also, pain kind of adds to the picture too, of not being able to think as clearly, and so things become even bigger than they would be at other times. So I quickly learned that I needed to do something to change my approach, because partially it wasn't helping me. I was dreading my job, thinking, oh no, I have 15 rooms to go to. How am I going to get this done? So I had to figure out, what would Jesus want me to do? How would he do it? So what did Jesus do? He would be personable, call them by their names, get to know them. So I would walk in the door, say that I was part of the healthcare team, and ask them how their day was going. And, you know, get them talking about things, not necessarily even about their hospital stay, but, you know, how long have you lived in Florida? Do you have a church family you're connected with? Or just, you know, things that would get the mind going. And then they would relax. You would see a different look on their face. And then if I pulled out that yellow sheet, do you think that went better? It went a ton better, because there was a rapport. There was some trust that was built. But there was also a lot of hard questions that I was asked in the hospital. So we go to slide 5. And this has gone on in hospice as well. Questions like, will I go to heaven? Can God forgive me? What's going to happen to me when I die? What's going to happen to my family? Will they be okay? What's heaven going to be like? Why is this happening to me? Why is God punishing me? Why do bad things happen to good people? And I know you don't have to be a patient to have that going through your head. You can just be here in church, you can be at home, you can be anywhere. And these questions can hit close to home. And some of these we have answers to, and we can formulate. But I also learned I couldn't just go in and say, well, I can tell you how you're going to get to heaven. So it had to be more so let's look at what does the Bible say? What do you believe? And coming alongside. This world is a difficult place. And in John 16:33, it's on slide 6, it says, "These things have I spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have tribulation, but take courage, because I've overcome the world." Well, I used to not like this verse. I didn't mind the first part where it said, "So that in me you'll have peace." Well, that sounds pretty good. And I like the fact that God's overcome the world and he has it in his hands, but I didn't like the fact that it says, "In this world you'll have tribulation." Because it doesn't say you might have tribulation, or you could have tribulation. What does it say?
You will.
You will. That's fairly daunting, isn't it? And I don't know where I picked up the idea that, well, if you go to church, if you pray, if you pay tithe, all that, life, if you keep it together, life will be pretty good. Well, I soon learned that there is trouble, and trouble happens. And it's because God said that because of sin and because of what's going on in this world, this will happen. So this has become to be one of my favorite verses when I'm dealing with patients and dealing with things in my own life, because it helps me put it into perspective, that I'm not suffering. Well, I'm not suffering because I did something wrong or because someone's out to get me, but it's more so, it is part of the sin-sick world that we live in. But that God has the end of the picture, and when I focus at the end of the picture, because we all know the end of the story, that keeps us going. And that's what gives me hope in being with patients that are asking those hard questions, is helping them see that there is hope, that there is love, that there is a Savior that cares for us more than anything. So one of the patients I've thought about often, it was actually a whole family I met. So this was in a little hospital in Florida Hospital, East Orlando. It was the hospital that was closest to the Orlando airport. It was in kind of a rough area of town. We had a lot of stabbings and shootings and drug activity. It was, for a country girl, I kept asking God, because I was in Florida for 14 years, "God, can't you just take me back to the country? What's so bad about the country? Aren't there people that need to know your message in the country?" But he kept saying, "Be still, my child, stay here." So for 14 years I was there, and for 10 of those years I was at this hospital, Florida Hospital, East Orlando, had the second busiest emergency department of Central Florida. We would see an average of 300 patients a day. And now I'm hearing the numbers are more like 400 to 500 patients. I mean, it is not slowing down. There is a great need. So this one day, I was assigned, I had 90 patients assigned to me on 3 different units. So I was supposed to visit those patients and check on them, but I was also on call in the afternoon. So, of course, in the middle of the day, my pager goes off, and I call, and they say, we need you down in the emergency room right now. So I had just finished visiting this nice lady, super nice lady. She had been in the hospital quite a few times, and she was on my medical surgical floor. And we had a good conversation, really strong faith, and I go downstairs, and there is a 40-year-old patient being coded. Not a good thing. So, and there was another situation going on too, so I was dealing with 2 families, and the patient, the woman who was being coded, the 40-year-old, I went into the little family waiting room, which is called the quiet room, and her 2 sisters were there. Well, as the story unfolded, they said, "We're just so concerned about our sister because our mom is upstairs." Well, it all came together. That sweet little lady I'd been with upstairs was the mother of the woman that was coding the room. So here we are thinking about both these situations going on. And unfortunately, the 40-year-old didn't make it. So here were these 2 sisters thinking, how are we going to tell our mother? We go upstairs, And unbeknownst to me, this is the third child she had lost. And this woman had such faith and resilience. And in her devastation, she goes, we have a plan. We know what God has for us. We know what's going to happen next. She goes, I hate this, but we're going to get through it. She goes, get me in a wheelchair and get me downstairs so I can see my daughter. So that's what we did. And she knew in her heart what her plan was, because she had thought about it. She had had these hard questions. She had already mulled them over in her head, talked with them with her family, and they would just look at each other. This day we wish would never come, but we know we're going to get through it. And the thing that made the difference is they had talked about the hard stuff in their life. They hadn't just said, oh, this may never happen. I don't need to talk about these with my family. I don't need to talk about my wishes because, we're going to keep on living. No, she had a plan. Other times I would be called in and I would have the exact opposite. Just this, you're already devastated with a horrible loss, but then think, I don't know what the wishes are of my loved one. I don't know if they want to be buried or if they want to be cremated. I don't know if they want to be on life support. I don't know any of this. And trying to guide in those conversations saying, well, what do you think they would want? It's very tough. Well, recently, and I know this seems like kind of a heavy subject for church, but it's something, a burden that's on my heart of having these hard conversations. And I think God gives us the example of speaking truth, speaking things that are hard. And he did it in a way that we are not able, because he could see and read the hearts. We can't do that. But what can we do? We can build relationships with others. And we can get to know people so they trust us, and then be able to have those conversations and lead in those conversations. So if we could go to slide 7. And I know our time is short, so we'll just look at this quick. But I love this way of looking at talking about hard things. It's called the 5 wishes. And if you want to go on to Aging with Dignity, you can see this online and fill it out with your family. But I like that it's put into wishes, so it's not more so, okay, I need you to fill out exactly what you need right now. But it's saying, I'll just read it quickly. The wish number 1 is the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. So it's thinking before you're in a crisis, before you're in a time when you can't think for yourself, is saying, who do I trust? Is it my spouse? Is it a sibling? Is it a close friend? Who is it that I can speak with, that can speak for me when I'm unable to speak for myself? Wish number 2, the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. And I think that's important to look at that. Look at it ethically, morally, spiritually, of what do you feel God is calling you in your life? And I can't say what it is for you. It might be different for me than you or you. But I think there's principles in the Bible of stewardship and of ethical ways and spiritual ways of how God can lead us to make those decisions that are hard in our lives. And when we think about them now, it's important, because you'd be amazed how many Christians I've met that are afraid to think about these. Well, if I think about it, I might be going against God's will. Well, God is with us through it all. Amen. And if we're on life support or not, His will still happens. And when we think about these things, it makes us more comfortable and takes away some of the fear from it. So wish number 3, how comfortable I want to be. That has to do with pain management, and also has to do with just the environment you want to be in. How I want people to treat me. And that's important too. If you're ever sick, do you want to have everyone know that you're in the hospital, or do you only want a few people to know? Do you want prayer? What type of support do you want? And what I want my loved ones to know. So that has to do with matters of forgiveness, how you wish to be remembered, and about things about your funeral and memorial plans. So these are heavy subjects, but they're important subjects too, because hospice has taught me to value life, to live it in the moment. And I started realizing really that's a value that all of us as Christians should value, It's living life to the fullest, not just waiting until I get this terminal diagnosis and saying, oh goodness, I may only have 6 months left, so I better hurry up and start living my life well. But it's looking at life as a precious gift, valuing our loved ones so much that we're willing to ask those hard questions, and being willing to take the time, because it's not always just a one time, but it's staying there and listening and being there. Let's look at slide number 8. And this gives me hope in asking questions and living in our lives. And it says, if we live for the Lord. And if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to God.
Amen.
So there's really nothing to fear when we have the hope that God is with us and that we belong to God and He doesn't forget us even when we're not here anymore. In closing, one of my favorite hospice patients taught me this. Her name was Shirley. And the moment I came, because when we have a patient admitted to hospice, we go out on a visit with a social worker, a nurse, and a chaplain. So we have whole person care, which I think is kind of a neat thing. And sometimes people are a little daunted when they see a chaplain walk in. Oh, you're just going to thump the Bible on my head, aren't you? Or, oh, I already have a pastor. I don't really need you. But when I walked into this lady's apartment, she said, I am so glad you're here, chaplain, because I'm going to really need you. she just laid it out, and it made me wonder. I'm like, I wonder what this is about. But in listening, she said, can you just stay and talk to me for a bit? So we stayed and talked, and she had a lot of questions on her heart. She goes, how am I going to be remembered? Will I be remembered? Did my life matter? And what will happen to me when I die? She had lived for about 5 years fighting cancer, so she had lived in this kind of uncertainty for a long time. But when her body started failing greatly, it all of a sudden just started coming in on her, and she was so anxious and upset. And so we spent several afternoons just talking and reflecting and having her delve into the strength that she had. Because I can't impart it on others, but I can help them lean into what they already have experienced. And so one of the questions I like to ask is, so what's good about God? And the minute I said that, she goes, I can think of so many things. God has done immense things in my life. And so she started reflecting and sharing. And what a difference when she started thinking, that's true, God got me through this and this and that and that. And He hasn't forgotten me. And so we started talking about some of her relatives. I said, so when you were a kid, who did you look up to? And so she started talking about her grandparents. I said, have you ever forgotten them? She said, no. I said, I don't think you'll be forgotten either, because you've made those marks on other people's lives. And the day before she had to go to the hospice house, because her health started failing super fast, she just had such a different peace on her, about her, and she just said, I'm going to be okay. I'm actually kind of excited. She goes, the next thing I'm going to see is Jesus.
Yes.
She goes, is that wrong that I'm excited? She goes, but I am excited. She goes, my body can't go any further. So she goes, I know I'll be okay.
Amen.
And I love that we have the hope. Slide number 9 says, from Revelation 21:4, a verse that we probably all could say. So you want to read it with me? He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. What a beautiful promise that is, isn't it?
Amen.
When the going gets tough, we all need to be able to claim that and realize we know the end of the story. We know that there's more. So, I would like to just encourage you, if we look at slide 10, to live intentionally. Don't wait until those big things happen in your life, but live intentionally. And do this by loving God, loving others, and intentionally asking questions. So, think of those questions that you can ask others. So those can help us to get to know each other better and to build those bonds and to take away some of the fear and barriers that can be. So, and just remember, Jesus was a great questioner, and we can learn a lot from him.
Amen.